The moment the child collapsed against the glass wall of the skyscraper office, leaving a faint smear of dirt on its polished surface, the billionaire's entire boardroom fell silent. Her tiny frame shook from exhaustion, her torn shirt fluttering as the air conditioning hit her bruised skin. It was the kind of silence that didn't just stop conversations, it stopped breathing. No one knew her name yet. No one knew the nightmare that had pushed her into the tallest tower in the city. But everyone felt, with a sharp sting in their chest, that this little girl had already seen more suffering than any of them ever would. If you believe every child deserves hope, compassion, and a second chance, tap the ripple of love, like, comment, share, and subscribe to support stories that bring humanity alive. Her name, as they would soon learn, was Era, barely 9 years old, with hair that had once been golden but was now matted with dust and city grime. Era stared at the man in the white kandura, towering, wealthy, untouchable, yet her eyes carried a courage that unsettled even him. The billionaire, Zahir Al-Mansour, was used to corporate battles, political games, and high-stakes negotiations. But he wasn't prepared for the quiet, shattered strength of a starving child standing in front of his private safe. Era hadn't come for money, not in the way people assumed. She'd walked barefoot across the city to reach this building because someone told her Zahir never turned away a child. But rumors were rarely reliable, and kindness from the powerful was even less so. Moments earlier, Zahir had made a joke to lighten the tense air after finding her in his office. He'd raised an eyebrow, pointed at the massive safe beside his desk, and said with a smirk that made his assistants laugh, "Open the safe and $500 million will be yours." A joke. Nothing more. A throwaway line. But the girl didn't laugh. That was the moment Zahir realized she wasn't here for games. Something in her expression, a flicker of desperation mixed with raw determination, made the joke land like a cruel challenge. She didn't speak yet, but her trembling fingers slowly reached toward the safe as if trying to understand what impossible task she was expected to perform. The billionaire watched with a strange tightening in his chest. He thought she would cry, collapse, or retreat. Instead, Era leaned closer, her eyes scanning the keypad, the lock, and the metal door with quiet calculation. The room suddenly felt heavier. Thick with unspoken questions. Zahir couldn't explain it, but he felt something shift inside him, a ripple of guilt, maybe, or the uncomfortable realization that he had underestimated her pain. Behind him, the suited men, his advisors, his security, whispered and chuckled, but the billionaire lifted a hand to silence them. The girl deserved his attention. More importantly, she demanded it simply by existing there, fragile yet unbroken. Daylight poured through the panoramic windows overlooking the skyline, casting long beams over the marble floor. The city below roared with its usual ambition, greed, and relentless pace, but inside that office, time slowed to a heartbeat. Era finally spoke, not with her lips, but with her eyes, revealing a story she hadn't told yet. One filled with hunger, fear, and a longing that pierced right through Zahir's carefully built walls. She began to turn away from the safe as if giving up, but then something unexpected happened. She touched the cold metal door once more, pressing her palm flat against it, not to open it, but simply to steady herself. And in that small gesture, Zahir saw a truth clearer than any balance sheet: the girl wasn't after wealth, she was after survival. Still, he didn't know why she'd come here of all places. The story began to unfold in fragments. She had lost her mother months ago and had been living in a derelict construction site with her younger brother. She worked odd jobs, begged for leftovers, washed car windows, anything to keep him alive. But last night, a storm had flooded the site, and her brother had fallen ill from the cold. Someone on the street saw her panic and told her that the richest man in the city was known for testing people, that sometimes, he rewarded the ones who dared to ask. Era believed the story. She didn't understand wealth, business, or power plays. She only understood that she needed help, and this building was the only lead she had left. As she stood there swaying from exhaustion, Zahir felt a strange ache in his chest. A memory stirred, one he kept buried behind decades of success. He once had a sister. Younger. Fragile. She died long before he became wealthy. A loss that carved his heart into a shape he never allowed anyone to see. Era's fearful eyes were painfully similar to hers. And then came the moment no one expected. Era pressed 3 random digits on the keypad. Not because she thought it would work, but because she refused to leave the challenge empty. Then she whispered something barely audible, something that hit Zahir harder than any business loss ever had. "I don't want the money. I just want my brother to live." The room seemed to stop breathing again. Zahir's eyes softened. The mocking amusement disappeared. And for the first time in many years, the billionaire felt powerless, not in a humiliating way, but in the human way he'd forgotten existed. The advisors behind him exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen Zahir shut down million-dollar proposals without blinking. They had never seen him hesitate in front of a child. He finally approached her, each step echoing like distant thunder across the office floor. Standing before her, he towered like a monument, but his voice, when he finally spoke, was low and weighted with something close to remorse. What happened next wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply humane. Zahir bent down and checked the wounds on her arms, the bruises, the blistered feet. He saw the hunger, the dehydration, the raw endurance. And in that moment, the man known for impenetrable emotional walls made a decision, a genuine one, not a joke, not an act, not a performance for his board. He picked her up gently, carried her past the stunned staff, and ordered his entire team to mobilize. Cars. Doctors. Supplies. Protection. Era tried to resist at first, insisting she needed to walk on her own, but her body gave out in his arms. And Zahir felt the smallest, heaviest weight he'd ever held, a child whose life depended on hope. They drove across the city. The sun was bright, reflecting off the skyscrapers like shards of light cutting through shadows. Zahir felt the uncomfortable warmth of something unfamiliar, responsibility mixed with compassion. When they reached the flooded construction site, Zahir's breath caught. Era's brother, Soren, only 5 years old, lay motionless under a patch of broken tarp. A thin cough escaped the boy's chest, and that was enough to ignite the billionaire's resolve like wildfire. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. Within hours, both children were admitted to a private hospital. Within a day, Soren's fever broke, and Era ate her first real meal in weeks. Zahir visited them every day. He brought books, clothes, stuffed toys, awkward gestures at first, then genuine ones. The children changed something in him. Not through tears or tragedy, but through their unspoken resilience. He found himself sitting by their hospital beds longer than he stayed in board meetings. When the doctors finally declared both children stable, Era asked if she could go home. Zahir didn't answer immediately. Instead, he made a decision that would rewrite all 3 of their lives. Before you read the ending, please drop a comment. What would you do if you were the billionaire in this moment? The billionaire arranged permanent housing for them, enrolled them in school, hired caregivers, and set up a trust fund that guaranteed their future. But Era didn't know about the last part until he brought her back to his office, to the same massive safe where everything began. He placed a keycard in her hand. Not to open $500 million. To open her new life. He told her the safe now contained documents of guardianship, bank accounts for her and Soren, and something priceless, a framed photo of his late sister, placed beside their names as a symbol that they were now part of the family he thought he'd lost forever. Era cried for the first time. So did Zahir. And the office, once cold and silent, felt warm for the first time in years. If this story touched your heart, support it with a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps more emotional stories reach those who need hope. Zahir never repeated the joke again. Instead, he repeated something else, a promise. That no child